please sit down. Let's gonna continue the session. Now there will be a very interesting session titled Clean Hydrogen H2 Imports. This special session is managed by and organized by a Clean Hydrogen Partnership. So now I kindly ask Mirela to come to the table. Also, if possible, Tudor Constantinescu, sit down as well. Also, Stern Bergheimen, also come to the scenario. Stanislas de Mestere and Lionel Boyot. And
really my pleasure to be here. And thank you very much to the co-organizer. Thank you, Jorge, for having us. And a pleasure to build on the results from the project, from H2 Ports, but also on everything else that we are doing in Brussels, if I can say that, at European level, or at least the first speakers will come from Brussels. And let's see what we can do. And I will not, of course, start without having again my director, my executive director of the Clean Hydrogen Partnership, Ms. Valérie Bouillon-Delporte, who will open this session.
Thank you, Mirela. Always a pleasure to do this kind of things with you. So, good afternoon this time, and welcome to this Hydrogen Imports dedicated session. And first of all, thank you for those who were with us this morning and who are still with us this afternoon for this, in order to discuss again on hydrogen port. This morning we've seen hands-on demonstration. I was really impressed by the H2 Ports Live and the facility they developed on the port of Valencia. And we have seen hydrogen technology not only on a brochure or on a video, but we've seen real products, real application that are functioning. Jorge was telling me, oh, don't pay attention, the painting is not really clean, but that demonstrates that at least the stacker is really moving containers around the port. So this afternoon, what do we want to do? We want to build a bridge between what we saw and what you saw on the ground and the wider picture. European policy, funding instruments, port strategy, and ultimately your own ambitions. Let me start with the role of a Clean Hydrogen Partnership in this specific environment. In 2023 and 2024, we published our 3-part study on hydrogen in ports and industrial coastal areas with Deloitte. And this work was not only a theoretical exercise, it was originated from questions we kept hearing from ports again and again. Where are the real opportunities for hydrogen? And where are the main barriers? How do we build a robust technico-economic case for bunkering, for industrial uses, for port machinery? And how do we sequence investments and infrastructure in a way that is realistic and bankable? So this study provides first a European-wide mapping of hydrogen opportunities and barriers in ports ecosystem. The second thing was it sets out techno-economic pathways for different use cases, from bunkering to industrial demand to cargo handling equipment. And third, it offers very concrete recommendations on infrastructure planning, regulatory alignment, and investment sequencing. And today, I'm very proud to say that these reports are being used as a reference framework by ports, industry stakeholders, European Commission, and several member states. They help them answer a very simple but fundamental question. Is this feasible? And if so, how do we make it happen? We are today moving a step further. The Clean Hydrogen Partnership is preparing a new, more capacity-building-oriented study focusing on helping ports and regions translating strategies into credible project pipelines. I'm sure Mirella and Lionel will talk a little bit about it later. In parallel, we have launched in 2025 a project development assistance initiative dedicated on how to support regional ecosystem in maturing hydrogen projects. A second project development assistance will be launched in 2026, and we have a certain ambition and a very clear aim to help ports and regions as well to move from vision to investment-grade project more quickly. This afternoon, we'll cover different topics, and Mirella will guide you further in the agenda of this afternoon. We'll start with a set of European strategies and insights with different representatives that are now on stage. But we will also turn to the ports themselves. I would like to thank again and to congratulate the H2 Ports project, because with its hydrogen refueling station, rich stacker, Yard tractor, you are a first-of-a-kind demonstration in major European port. But you are no longer alone. We'll hear from ports across Europe. Hirtshals, Antwerp Bruges, a Baltic cluster, Venice, about how they are integrating hydrogen into their strategies, how they are piloting new solutions, and how they plan to scale. Ports positioning themselves not just as logistic nodes, but as energy hubs, industrial clusters, and anchors of Hydrogen Valley. That's what you're going to hear this afternoon. Of course, we'll conclude the session with a forward-looking panel in order to focus on what comes next. But let me leave you with 3 messages as we open this very dedicated session. First, hydrogen in ports is no longer theoretical. Projects like H2 Port in Valencia show that hydrogen machinery and infrastructure can operate safely and effectively in real port conditions. Second, scaling will require coordinating planning and collective effort. No single actor can do this alone. Port authorities, industry, shipping companies, regulators, finance companies all need to align around shared roadmaps and timelines. And third, the Clean Hydrogen Partnership is here to support you. We like repeating again and again, we're much more than just a funding agency. We're here to help you succeeding. Through knowledge, studies, innovation funding, and project development assistance, we are committed to helping ports across Europe move from pilots to large-scale deployment. So I invite you all this afternoon to engage actively, to challenge the assumptions, to use this session to build convictions that will carry your project to the next level. The next wave of hydrogen deployments in European ports is being shaped now. It's being shaped today, and you are the ones making this possible. So thank you, and I look forward to this very interesting discussion.
Thank you very much, Valérie, and for introducing the afternoon, doing part of my job. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. And then I will not take more with the introduction, and I will go straightly into the first part, into the European strategies and insights. So we'll go to that first. We'll hear from the European Commission. We'll hear from Hydrogen Europe. We'll hear from a market outlook from Deloitte. And of course, we'll hear from our side, from my team, a bit on what we plan to do next. Like indeed Valérie already introduced, for us ports, first time when we look at them, we look when the International Energy Agency, you may remember the report of the IEA, and where they identified, and I'm trying to quote, the ports as the missing link in the energy transition. And that's when we started looking at them as a type of an ecosystem where we can demonstrate the different applications from production to the end use of hydrogen. And of course, due to their not only closeness, if you want, to the renewable energy sources, proximity to the industrial areas, but also proximity to all multimodal transport applications. So we'll see many business cases coming from that, and the examples you will see in the afternoon, you will also get them from a valley's perspective. You will guess immediately why valley in a port, or why port as a valley. So, Tudor, it is my pleasure, Tudor Constantinescu, Principal Advisor in the European Commission at DG Energy. My pleasure to give you the floor to tell us a bit Commission perspective.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mirela, Valerie, and Juan Manuel, and everybody here for having me today. I'm pleased I could make it and be also with you in person, finally. And to share with you, I was asked to share with you a little bit the policy framework at EU level, both in relation to energy, but also in relation to hydrogen, and particularly hydrogen focused, and how does this relate to ports. So I tried to give you a little bit of a comprehensive picture of what's going on at the EU level, and not to start from really far away, but I'm really pleased to say that hydrogen over the last couple of years made it stronger in the energy policy, and also in this respect, ports indeed, as Mirela pointed out, when we did the first report with the IEA, and we launched a Global Ports Coalition, which I'll come at the end to say a few words about it, recognize that at the end of the day, ports will be indeed the center where perhaps half of the final energy hydrogen consumption will take place around the port. So that's why they are very important. Some of them became hydrogen valleys, and we definitely try to look at how to make ports in their transition also sometimes towards energy hubs. And you heard this morning a little bit about the EU port strategy, which is coming on, but we try to link into that as well the role of hydrogen in ports, and how ports can play this role in the most effective way. Bon, briefly, and that's why I have some slides, because I'm not going to go too much in details on them, but I thought it may be interesting for you to have them afterwards. So we have put in place the most comprehensive legislative framework for hydrogen in the last couple of years. So we started in 2020 to draft the hydrogen strategy. It was in periods of just when the pandemic started, I have to say, but we were working already years before, of course, on hydrogen, and very much of the work, in particular in terms of research and innovation, was anchored through this partnership, which was Clean Hydrogen at that time, fuel cells and hydrogen joint undertaking. And through which we managed over the last 15, 20 years, to move also electrolyzers from capacities of 15, 20 kilowatts towards 20 megawatts. So, and then to start counting in the energy system and into the perspective we see for the future with hydrogen towards 2050, maybe getting 10% towards 50%, depending on the models of the final share in energy. But when we made the strategy, we identified about 40 actions related to energy system integration, and 20 specifically for hydrogen, what we need to do in order to put this regulatory framework in place. And this is what we have tried to do. First of all, to define what is renewable, what is low carbon hydrogen, and I think starting from the basics, if we want to decarbonize, and hydrogen is to play an important role in the economy and to be more used in the economy, of course it has to be decarbonized as well. So it's either renewable or low carbon. So we had to put in place the framework for it, to define what it is, under what conditions, how do we ensure that by producing hydrogen we don't deviate and use clean electricity for this purpose, and in other parts of the energy system we use coal. So all these things, and we know that renewables are variable, we don't have the sun all the time and all that. We don't want also to create congestions in the energy system, so we had to take all these elements into account to develop this criteria for hydrogen, to develop the market rules and infrastructure, to look at how the gas infrastructure we have in Europe can be used, what part of it can be used eventually for hydrogen. We have 2.2 million kilometers of natural gas pipelines in Europe. The largest majority, 2 million, are actually at distribution level. And they are maybe not so much for hydrogen. We have to see where the role of hydrogen is more and what can be adapted at transmission level. And then we had to look at what could be project of common interest in that respect. And then finally, of course, to give a direction to the industry and to give a direction also to the transport sector, to mobility, to see as the targets we can have. So all this we have worked to try, and therefore now Europe is the only region in the world actually having concrete targets. And here I don't speak about sometimes indicative objectives which were coming out of the power, but the binding targets, which are the Renewable Directive. It's the first region of the world to have such targets, at least for renewable hydrogen. And now also the definition, and also next week will be published, we have the delegated act on renewable hydrogen. Next week will be published the one on low carbon hydrogen as well. At the same time, we have put in place a system of state aid rules and funding mechanism. We know, and I'll come back to that, it's not enough public funding for this. Therefore, we have also to be very careful in terms of where we steer the public funding, but to try to optimize and to maximize the leverage it can bring. This is a little bit about the Renewables Directive. I'm not going to enter in details on that, but what is important to underline here, and therefore is relevant also for hydrogen, we notice the penetration of renewables in the power generation. And everybody is aware, and we know now also its objective have even towards 2030, 40 will move towards 70% and more, 80% maybe. But in power generation, the more difficult parts where we have the penetration of renewables are related to industry and to the transport sector, and also to heating and cooling. So we had to then to look at these sectors and to see what kind of targets we can have, what is realistic, also what kind of mechanism we can put in place in order to decarbonize these sectors and to have a bigger penetration of renewables also in these sectors. And therefore we have this target for renewables overall of 40.2.5%, aspiring to 45% by 2030. And then targets which are somehow detailed at the level of transport, heating and cooling, and also industry, and some of them related, of course, to the renewable fuels of non-biological origin, where hydrogen steps in, and which is so important for creating the hydrogen market at the EU level. So now, with the Renewable Directive on one hand, we had on the other side to look at the gas. Gas is still an important component of the energy system, and it is all the infrastructure we have mentioned. And therefore, to try to put the two things together and to have an alignment also in terms of what is required in order to have compatible and coherent certification and also criteria for renewable, respectively low carbon hydrogen, how to assess this, what are the boundaries of the system, and what are the greenhouse gas emissions which you want to achieve. So this is now in place, and this is a basis to develop the work, and to develop the work also at European level. And here is something important. We have since many years under the Connecting Europe facility, the project of common interest. And these were extremely important, let me tell you, just historically speaking, also notably for gas. Because many years ago, but not so many, let's say 10, 20 years ago, every country wanted to develop its own, and not every country, that's wrong. Every minister wanted to develop its own pipeline, and then the ministers were changing in some countries quite often, and they wanted other pipelines. So it was really very difficult to streamline this process, especially in Central Eastern Europe, but not only. And then we came with this concept of project of common interest, and asking member states to stay together in regional groups and to define what are really the important projects for more than one, and how to develop a EU-wide internal energy market. And this is how we streamline the projects for gas and then also for electricity. Now we expanded this towards renewables, and now gas is completely out. We don't finance anymore, but instead we do finance hydrogen. So, and repurposing or new pipelines for hydrogen, which are of common interest again, and storage facilities have been an electrolyzers. We had a year ago the first list, which we had 65 PCI, PMI projects. PMI stands for Project of Mutual Interest, when there are more countries involved, which are also, some of them are not part of the EU. can be in the south, can be in the east, but they are important for developing and for strengthening the energy security of Europe as well. And this year, I'm pleased to say, just 2 days ago, I think yesterday was a launching conference with over 100 hydrogen and electrolyzers projects out of 135 PCI PMIs, which found themselves on this second list of PCI PMI. I think this is really very, very impressive, and these are really fresh news since yesterday. Now, at the same time, we know that we cannot have all the hydrogen produced in the EU. If the demand goes according to our expectation, for, again, renewable and low-carbon hydrogen in order to help decarbonization and achieving the 2030 targets. And we gave a push to hydrogen because this means also industrial development. And this was a bit the spirit, a little bit forgotten, but reinforced with the Clean Industrial Deal, even of the Green Deal. So to accelerate investments in the beginning in order to have maybe more capex to attract investments, and later on to reduce the overall system costs. This is, at the end of the day, in addition to environmental benefits and to the climate benefits, is also economic philosophy which helps strengthening European industry and replacing aging energy infrastructure. And hydrogen can play a role in that, and we know that we need imports. In some communications there are maybe some figures up to 50%. We have seen also IRENA studies which speak at the global level by 2050, 20% of the global hydrogen will be traded. In any case, we know that there are regions in Europe which definitely will need to import more than they are able to produce. And therefore we try to promote a level playing field and the regulatory framework, taking advantage, if you want, of the fact that we are the first region in the world who has such a comprehensive regulatory framework in place, and to use the relations and to develop memorandum of understanding with a number of countries in the south, in the east, but also in Africa, in South America, Ukraine, of course, to take advantage of the possible cooperation in the area of hydrogen, renewable hydrogen, and covering the imports which we still need, but for which the importers have to face the same requirements regarding certification for low carbon and renewable hydrogen as domestic producers. So it's nothing discriminatory on that, but we should not also undermine our own producers. And you know this very well, because many of them can be in the area of ports, being offshore or onshore. Now, the infrastructure needs to expand. I'm presented briefly before the results related to the PCIs and the PMIs, but we need clearly to have more, at least at European level, and this is the most cost-effective way to expand the infrastructure and to have the pipelines for hydrogen. Many of them at the transmission level would have actually to be repurposed. We identified again a number of corridors linking the areas with the biggest potential for production with the centers for consumption, and this is to be accompanied also by projects very important in storage. Now, at the same time, we have the targets for the shipping and try to make the link to the shipping industry, to the maritime, also to the aviation. And here also we have targets for the penetration of renewable fuels of non-biological origin, targets related also to decarbonization and to greenhouse gas emission reductions. And all of that, of course, even if it doesn't say it has to be so much hydrogen, but when we speak about RNFBOs and we speak about decarbonization, definitely renewable and low carbon hydrogen come into the picture and has a big potential to play a role in these sectors. Currently, and in this commission, we had to strengthen more the dimension, and one has to bear in mind this came after REPower, after the Russian invasion in Ukraine, the need for more security. By the way, it was now also announced the adoption of the REPower with the phasing out of all gas and fossil fuel dependencies from Russia by 2027. But then we had to see how we develop further the energy system and at the same time being competitive on a global scale. And the situation of Europe, needless to say, we are different from other parts of the world, notably the US, who has a lot of gas. We don't have this gas, so on the other hand, we stay committed to decarbonization, to tackle the potential we have, to tap the potential we have from the domestic energy resources as much as possible, renewables in particular. At the same time, together with competitiveness, the issue of affordability, because indeed we have witnessed huge increase in prices, notably during the crisis in 2022, but even afterwards the prices didn't go back to the level where they were before. So it's a lot of work still on this, and we have an action plan on affordable energy. Just to mention that in some countries the taxes and levies on energy, including on electricity, were representing up to 70% of the total price. So some of those countries reduce very much now the taxes. So this is perhaps more simple to do. Other countries have discriminated electricity faced to gas. So, and there were very low taxes on gas and a lot of high taxes on electricity when you could have renewable produced locally and didn't make a lot of sense. These things are currently being corrected by member states. We also revise the state aid rules. We try to put in place now also a decarbonization accelerator bank, plus looking at the link with the industry to create this lead market, which is something important, and where also hydrogen has been identified as an important dimension, and for which technologies we try to promote more. We looked at the overall investments, to the dependency we have on, I will come back to that a bit, on critical raw materials, because this is something which will happen with the energy transition. We are fully aware of that. And try to create, on the other hand, a level playing field, which I was mentioning before, in relation to hydrogen, but not only for hydrogen, in relation to the imports. Yeah, this CBAM, which is currently going also through an effort of simplification, but which will be very important. Basically, if a country outside Europe produces a product which also is covered by a kind of ETS system or by a CO2 tax, this tax will be deducted from what would have to pay in Europe. So not pay twice, but we make sure that European companies are not put in a disadvantaged position and we face this carbon leakage we have faced before. At the same time, we phase out the ETS because, again, to have the level playing field. So skills are, again, very important. For hydrogen in particular, this is an area where the GU, the Clean Hydrogen Partnership, has played also a pioneering role and pushed this, and we'll link it further with what the work which is going to take place under the Net Zero Industry Act. And then we have the sectoral action plans that we speak of: automotive, steel and metal, chemicals, transport and bioeconomy. And again, in all this, hydrogen will have to play a role. Grids package, I mentioned before the importance of grids. This will come also this year. And it's very important because it will help to strengthen the cross-border energy infrastructure, will enable this deployment of hydrogen infrastructure, which is new, either through the repurposing, which is 70%, 80% cheaper than new pipelines for hydrogen, or where needed, build new ones. A more effective cost and benefit sharing mechanism between the member states for infrastructure of cross-border relevance, and we hope this will give an additional push to the internal market. Shorter permitting process. We know, on the other hand, that sometimes this permitting is very much local, so we encourage very much the work in this area, and we know that it's very important for the ports as well. More the efficient use of the infrastructure, taking advantage of digitalization, of course. And last but not least, given the situation with the war at the eastern borders of Europe, to have a more cybersecurity and protection of critical energy infrastructure, but also reinforced supply chains. We'll also come in an electrification action plan. We know that electricity is about 27% of final energy consumption. It's still the most efficient way to decarbonize. We expect to reach 50% at least by 2050. So it remains an important part of the final energy consumption, which is not based on electrons, it's based on molecules. And again, hydrogen here will have an important role to play to decarbonize, being renewable and low carbon hydrogen, of course. And meanwhile, deploying more renewables, deploying more sources of electricity, we can also facilitate more cost-effective production, because still, in the price of hydrogen, very important is the price of electricity. So more renewables we'll have in the end, and more integrated projects, better we can build the business case for hydrogen production as well. So this will come again also with some recommendation on taxes. And on the other hand, member states will have to take their part and to analyze where there are really barriers which they can reduce in this respect. I mentioned before the critical raw materials. This is something which is very important in the energy transition. We estimate that it will be an increase by 4 to 6 times between now and 2040 of imports. Of course, these imports come from far away. They will have to come mainly through the ports. Again, it's on one hand, you can help the ports, can facilitate this. On the other hand, is a growing business for ports. So maybe we'll import less fossil fuels, but will be other products which will be imported. But where we'll try also to diversify, and we encourage very much more cooperation at the global level between ports, between different energy companies, because currently we are very much dependent on a limited number of countries. You see some examples here that we speak about rare earth elements or about platinum or about lithium. So it's very much concentrated in a hand of countries, and we think the first criteria for competitiveness will be in this respect to try to diversify and to have more competition in this respect. And at the end, of course, we need investments for all this. Currently, we estimated about 570 billion per year between now and 2030. And after 2030, we speak about 690 billion per year. You know very well that unfortunately the EU budget is far below these expectations, and also public budgets in general far below. So what is most important and what we try to do is put in place a strong regulatory framework, but also incentives to mobilize the capital, to mobilize private sector. Therefore, we will also come with a clean energy investment strategy, hopefully before the end of the year, if not beginning of next year, where to address investment barriers and to stimulate investments in clean energy, including in hydrogen, and where to find ways to attract more the private capital. For hydrogen in particular, we have already in place a number of mechanisms. We have the recovery and resilience plans, where we have witnessed almost 15 billion euros, which were allocated already by member states for hydrogen projects. We have the important project of common European interest with the special state aid regime. We have the cohesion funds. We have the ETS innovation. In particular, here we have the hydrogen bank, the clean hydrogen partnership, which is financing research and innovation. We'll need to strengthen then the international dimension, now first of all for energy in general, with reliable partners and developing for energy supplies memorandum of understanding, but also looking more at the climate dimension and with the developing world, and developing this global gateway and the clean trade and investment partnership to support those countries in developing and taking an approach which you also have at EU level in terms of energy system integration. When it comes to hydrogen, to find the benefits themselves in integrating renewables and decarbonizing, but when there is possibility to produce more, of course, to respect the criteria we have in the EU and to export also to the EU. In terms of creating a global hydrogen market, we have the CBAMs, the modernized CBAM, which I was referring, and we'll have more projects to support, and also multilateral cooperation, which is, again, still very important, that we speak about the rules and the objectives at a global level under COP, but also that we speak about clean energy ministerials, the mission innovation, the IPAG, the IEA, which was mentioned a couple of times already, or IRENA. So all this, plus, of course, a regional partnership we have with Africa and under the neighborhood instrument also with Ukraine and others, is very important for the future. In this context, the ports have an important role to play. I'm not going to mention this again, but this is a reflection of what we have taught already 2019, 2020, when we established a global ports coalition with already 60 ports engaged around the world under the Clean Energy Ministerial, and when we have, together with the joint undertaking, looked at how the European ports can get better organized, and you'll hear more about this today. But now we look again into the future, and we see that there is still weak demand creation, that there are investment risk and lack of financial de-risking mechanisms. There are complex permitting procedures. We don't have a complete framework for international cooperation in this area, and therefore we have come with a suggestion, and with the joint undertaking with the Clean Hydrogen GU, to look further into this, to support this international work through the project that Valerie was also mentioning in the beginning, and to assess the investment needs of the ports, to encourage ports to develop their plans which are suited to their circumstances, which can be sometimes different. And we have to look at both large ports but also smaller ports, and also the inland ones for the locked-in countries in Europe, the fluvial ones. So to foster, on the other hand, this international port-to-port cooperation, and also ports can play an important role in stimulating the use, the production, and the cost-effective integration, not only in their application, but also with the industrial cluster, or if not, with the local communities, being for transport or for other applications, and to support this dialogue which they should have with the stakeholders in this respect. So with this, I thank you. Maybe it was a bit long, but I thought to give you an overall perspective on what we try to do at least, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tudor. Indeed, long, which shows the complexity of the file, I would say. Let me look at it constructive. Like any file, I guess, at EU level. And for us, implementing it, I don't know if it's scary. When you look at everything you have to do, and I took few notes from different actions whenever you set up the legislations. What did you say? 40. And then a lot of projects, cross-border projects, imports, infrastructure, maritime targets, grids package, gas package, RED III, CRM, investments, and international collaboration, finally. So I don't know if, like I said, I should be scared, or maybe I should take it as normal, because I guess that's like any file, and I should be, on the other hand, happy that hydrogen has reached this level in the European Commission, because if we have to think about 15 years ago, I think we were looking forward to these times. Anyway, let me not take more of time and move to Stijn. Stijn, where is my notes? Yeah. Let me to say properly your affiliation. Huh? So Stijn Verkamen, Director Climate and Energy in Deloitte in Brussels, and Stijn will bring the market perspective. So we heard about everything that we have to deal at EU level, and let's look a bit at the market from your perspective. You did with us a study. I'm sure you did more after the study, and I think you will tell us more. And I think we want to do even more, and we hope today to get some insights to move further. So Stijn, please.
Thank you, Miguel. Good afternoon, everybody. So indeed, nice to be here. Let's take a look. As introduced, we do quite a bit on hydrogen. So I work for Deloitte. We are a global advisory services firm. And over the last 3 years or so, I think we delivered much more than 200 projects in the space. We also have a dedicated hydrogen center of excellence. So really cross-value chain projects. And I have here my contact details. Don't hesitate to reach out. But let's go into a couple of concrete projects to give you some further insights. I don't have the time to elaborate in enormous depth, but as already mentioned, also by Valerie, these reports are available from the previous study that we have conducted in the 2023 timeframe. And let's look into a couple of KPIs still, and then I will elaborate a bit more. So as you can see, we have looked into various aspects. So how could hydrogen demand and supply evolve, the component of local production and import, the different carriers that exists, also the costs and the various regions of potential import relevance towards Europe. We also looked into different business cases and have identified barriers and challenges, technical, non-technical, safety-related, and provided recommendations, amongst others, in the space of R&D, such that also the JU has been able to elaborate further on them and link it to a strategic research and investment program. And that's not the only thing that we did. We also brought together a bigger and a wider coalition, which I think makes sense to also continue to build on. As already pointed out, there's the global SEM initiative, but also in Europe we have brought actually quite some ports together. So more than 20 ports really actively contributed, and we had 60 to 80 members, very active port members, European community to participate in this. We organized multiple events with 100 and more stakeholders. A second thing that I wanted to refer to is another piece of work that we have been doing. I don't want to elaborate on all the things that we've done, but I think it's a very interesting tool for you to be aware of, which is called the European Hydrogen Observatory. So the Hydrogen Observatory is really a one-stop shop of data, hydrogen data, where public can take a look. It's about hydrogen demand, so production capacity, different sites, but also production. It goes into policies and regulations, standards, patents, innovation, even training programs. So I really strongly invite you, if you're not yet aware, to take a look and see. I'm sure that you will find interesting information there. For example, we have some tools such as a levelized cost of hydrogen calculator, which allows you to calculate in the circumstances you are the levelized cost of hydrogen. And a second point I wanted to at least touch upon is indeed a bit linking to the macroeconomic outlook and the fact that hydrogen, amongst others, is also being used in industry, obviously, and a lot today, ammonia refinery, etc. Now, industry is quite a bit under pressure today in Europe, following the war in Ukraine, but also other various kind of impacting factors have put industry under pressure, and is definitely a dynamic that we see, which is impacting the industrial consumption nowadays in our port areas, but is also expected to impact how global value chains will continue to evolve. With a potential link towards imports of, is it hydrogen directly or ammonia, DRI, iron, but we can take a look in a moment as well. So what you see here on the timeline, just to recap, is the Antwerp Declaration, then the publication of the Clean Industrial Deal, and some work that we are also doing to monitor KPIs on competitiveness conditions. This is expected to come out in February of 2026, when the Commission will reconvene again in Antwerp, together with other, let's say, European member state leaders and the industrial community. Now let's take a look into some of the results that have been come out, just to at least make sure that you're aware that this is existing. As Tudor already mentioned, quite a bit of the hydrogen demand is imports and is expected to be imports. So that's what you can see on this slide. On the left-hand side, you can see all hydrogen demand we see today and some projections. We don't have a glass ball, but based on various scenarios existing, the demand that could potentially develop in port areas. So it's really quite significant. We have identified multiple demand, let's say, components, and maybe let me share a couple of reflections on what we see happening. So the blue bars are all industry related. So there for sure there will still be this industrial activity, but already today we see that there is a bit of a decline of hydrogen use and production in industrial areas today. This I would expect to be compensated through some imports, with some of the value chains also shifting towards other regions in the world. And I don't think, that's my personal opinion, that we should per se, let's say, go ahead such evolution. But I do think it's important that we strategically diversify such imports and that we are not dependent on one country or the other. Same goes for critical raw materials effectively. Now, let's have a view on some scenarios with regards to either production and imports. So that's what you see here and which we developed. There's a much more extensive model where different flows and port clusters have been connected to also importing regions, related costs, and so on and so forth. But what you can tell is that indeed, as already mentioned as well, and I will show an IRENA study recently published, we do see and we expect imports coming in, and that we will not be able to produce all hydrogen ourselves in Europe. That's quite obvious and well known, but it's also something that came out of the study. We see as a carrier ammonia, and I'm sure you're also aware, as one of the main carriers coming out, next to actually some others. I will come back to that in a second, as well as some piped imports. And maybe let's take a look into those. We did identify, on one hand, several investments that will be required in port areas. I'm not talking only about investments for example, port logistics, as we have seen today, but also import terminals, infrastructure, bunkering facilities, and so on and so forth, in a multi-fuel context for maritime and other transport applications. We also identified various import corridors. Again, you can see them here, North Africa, Middle East, and other regions, and then also connecting them further in a further future to a potential hydrogen backbone being developed. Now let's take a look, and this is another study that was referred to what a bit more recent. IRENA put forward as a 2050 potential scenarios, in particular with regards to imports. So what you see here, and that ties up a bit with some other points that I already mentioned, is the expectation from such a study is that in the European Union there would be in 2050 about 10 million tons of imports, which actually roughly coincides with what we also put forward, at least in some of the scenarios. And such imports could exist for a bit less than half ammonia, followed by gaseous hydrogen, so pipeline imports, but also not insignificant DRI imports. So we have the steel value chain, for which some of the, let's say, starts of the value chain, the more energy-intensive components, we see that happening also elsewhere, and not per se everything that will continue to exist as is in Europe, as well as methanol. To break down the value chain, I think it's interesting to see here all the different components, which we also elaborated much more in detail in the study. And you can see actually the very important and diversified role of ports, because everything that you see here, one way or another, takes place in the port areas. So we're talking about various types of export terminals, then indeed importing that into Europe. That's what you can see in the middle. Import terminals or hydrogen production itself, be it renewable or low carbon, storage, etc., and so on and so forth. And I'll go into just a second into some of concrete examples that we indeed see happening in the field. Now, what roles can port play? Very high level. On one hand, we see them operating as a landlord, so really providing plots of land, so to develop various activities. But more and more ports are actually moving from the left to the right into especially the community builder enabling role, and some of them are actually already investing actively to enable the ecosystem, the hydrogen economy, to let's say surface and emerge and grow. So those are the different, in a high level, port archetypes that we see. Now let's have a quick look into some let's say recent evolutions, some of them taking place a bit closer to my home, at least in the Port of Antwerp, Bruges area. One of them being this ammonia cracker facility, an innovation funded project, Enhance, by Air Liquide and others involved, to indeed enable the cracking from ammonia to hydrogen and then redistribution in Europe. So a very interesting thing to see come to life, and it's really innovation in practice and scaling the industrial innovations that we need. We also see the activity in refineries I already referred to, but as one of the really emerging value chains. So following also RED 3 for transport and the so-called refinery routes, we see that there is sufficient, let's say, traction for that business case to become viable. And here's an article of, for example, the partnerships, again, with Air Liquide and Total Energies. We see pilots going on with ammonia-powered gas carriers. On the right-hand side, a familiar face, the former executive director of the JU, being active on also hydrogen production in Brasilia in this case, and then linked to the DRI steel value chain. And then lastly, to conclude, two articles of some activity that we see in Rotterdam, again linked to maritime activities for also methanol. So this concludes a quick overview. I didn't go into very much details, but most happy to discuss later. I will have, I think, some reception in the evening, and also very keen and happy to see those evolutions taking place at the level of the Commission and the JU. And thanks again for having me over. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Stijn. And thank you for helping us, for supporting us with both the port study and the observatory, by the way. Very good angle that you brought in. Indeed, and it's a very valuable tool if you would like to look for more data. Let's look at the industry perspective. And I have the pleasure to introduce Stanislas, and you have to apologize me if I don't pronounce it well, the Mestier. Huh? It works. Officer for Industry and Sustainability in Hydrogen Europe. And let's hear from your side.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Stanislas, but Stan is fine. I'm with Hydrogen Europe, which is obviously a part of the Clean Hydrogen JU, and we represent our 600 plus different members along the hydrogen value chain. I'll be speaking briefly, I don't have as many slides, about the funding gaps in shipping decarbonization and how the international and EU legal frameworks help, or maybe they don't help in bridging this gap. So first, sort of current state of play. On the international spectrum, we're all aware of the MEPC2 vote, or the postponement of the vote rather, and the sort of disappointment that the net zero framework wasn't adopted. Well, from personal perspective, anyway. So we see it as a setback, very much so, but we do still see it as a postponement, and we hope, anyways, and see that this would be pushed through, hopefully by 2026 in a new vote. And until then, we see that there is an important role for the EU to play into showing that a legislative framework that very much mirrors what the net zero framework would be, with a fuel standard under the Fuel EU Maritime and a carbon price on ETS, how that combination can work. So it's kind of up to us to show, or up to the Commission as well, to showcase that this is a successful combination of policies, and in a way we kind of regionally are implementing a net zero framework that can be translated then to the IMO level. What do we have as drivers? I just mentioned them. We've got Fuel EU Maritime, where there is a GHG intensity limit with penalties up to 2,400 euros per ton. There is no RFNBO share currently, or not a one with teeth anyway. And then there is the ETS, very much with the inclusion of the maritime sector in ETS started last year. Allowances need to be submitted this year for 70% of their verified emissions at large for ships over 5,000 gigatons. It rose from 40%. It'll go into 100% by 2026. And in 2026, also non-CO2 emissions will be included, and the Commission will look into the inclusion of possibly inclusion of smaller vessels. So that's kind of the two pillars we have. We believe that legislatively this is the right approach. This is a good combination of policies. However, there is still a funding gap, and I'll try and illustrate that funding gap with the following 3 slides, but they're almost just one slide. This is just a clear funding gap that is currently there without any FuelEU Maritime, any policies current. So currently ammonia fuel would be around 3.5 times more expensive than a very low sulfur fuel oil, the sort of standard fossil alternative. If we include ETS and ETD, so they're the 2 little orange ones, they don't really change the market gap as much. They don't have the anywhere as near the impact to cover the cost. However, if we look at the potential non-compliance penalties in the FuelEU Maritime, we see that there is actually a potential to cover the cost gap, but it is technology neutral, and thus biofuels would be cheaper. This is also only a penalty for everything above the allowed emissions, and so there's no real incentive to start with RFNBOs or other fuels. So then there is the STIP. So 2 weeks ago, I think 2-3 weeks ago, the Commission came out with the Sustainable Transport Investment Plan. Sustainable Transport Investment Plan. Thank you. Sorry. So what's included? There are 2, in our opinion, important inclusions. The first one is a possible upcoming measures for maritime fuels analogous to SAF support. So how that works for sustainable aviation fuels is that there is a special reserve of 20 million allowances until 2030, specifically for sustainable aviation fuel. So our question is, if this might be included for maritime fuels as well. This would be very welcome. However, we have a few questions. How would this work? The Commission also included that we might look at an alternative measure. We don't really know what that would look like. And also our question is, it doesn't currently have any targeted RFNBO targets, including that would, in our opinion, be a good idea. Secondly, there is an encouragement for member states to propose earmarking for maritime revenues out of maritime ETS. We are aware that, for us, this falls short of actually earmarking itself the sectoral revenues. We're aware that this is a member state competency and this might be difficult, but we would have liked to see maybe stronger language, but okay. And then 2 other inclusions are a possible upcoming MRV framework for ETS Maritime and FuelEU Maritime. This would include both the regimes, so the FuelEU Maritime and the ETS regime, but they look at different emissions, right? So ETS only looks at direct emissions, and FuelEU Maritime at life cycle emissions. We are wondering how this would work practically, but we very much welcome the initiative to reduce administrative burden and to reduce cost eventually then as well. Lastly, the Commission also includes an examination of how PPAs could be extended to renewable and low-carbon fuels. This is something they've announced that they will do after 2026 when markets are more developed. We'll keep an eye on this. We were very curious to see what this would look like in practice. So for us, the question of what is missing is, as I mentioned earlier, binding RFNBO FuelEU Maritime targets. That would really create an incentive and a continued offtake, especially, that could really kickstart the markets. Earmarking ETS revenues back to the maritime sector. There as well, there is this again, this same message of a continuous stream of both offtake and investment for the sector. That also reduces dependencies of the sector on different sort of ad hoc, well, not really ad hoc, but funding schemes that might run out after a few years, and then you have to apply again. And there is more of a continuous stream of both offtake and investment. And then lastly, we very much see, but it's been discussed before, maritime transport as a lead market. So we would like to see also a lot of demand-side policies very much in line with what has been announced to be included under IAA currently for totally different sectors, but we'd like to see similar policies for the maritime sector as well. As a sort of idea, the total mobilization that is announced under STIP is 2.9 billion until the end of 2027 through different funding mechanisms. However, in the same documents, the Commission acknowledges that total investment needs, and I'm aware that it's not only that this shouldn't be only be public money, but that should be around 34.7 to 46.7 billion. So it is still quite a considerable funding gap. Our position would be, let's use the funds and the framework available to cover that gap, but let's give it teeth. And so, conclusion, STIP is a step in the right direction. The funding gap remains, and especially FuelEU Maritime binding RFNBO targets and an earmarked use of ETS revenues can ensure that this gap could be covered without, again, endless reliance on additional funding. I don't want to sound too cynical, obviously, but we think this is a really nice, different way of approaching this gap. So that is it. I think it was quite brief. I would then only remind you that next year we have a hydrogen week again, and everyone is obviously welcome, and we'll look at a lot of these questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stan, for bringing the maritime shipping perspective into the discussion, which was not so much focused in the previous, but of course, most of the fuel will have to be traded, if I could use that word, through the ports. So of course it's relevant for the discussion. But then I'm still wondering, why are we here today? So what can we do? So let me bring Lionel Boyo. He's a project officer in the Clean Hydrogen Partnership in my team. And let's see what we can do in terms of innovation, where we can put the first seed in which then, which can then grow with other funding opportunities, with other investments, be it public or private. So what can we do? Lionel, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Time for gymnastic. Indeed, the famous Andrei survey. Thank you. With such a title, if you are involved in port activities, please raise your hand. Wow, a lot. Second question, if you are involved with hydrogen activities, raise your hand. Okay. Brilliant. So this will allow me to skip some of my 50 slides into what matters, the linkage between the port and the hydrogen activity or economies, and how port can attract indeed funding to decarbonize the operation and the ecosystem using the hydrogen. So I move slide to this one, which it's small, I realize it's small, apologies for that. On the map, you have existing project, hydrogen valleys, all over Europe, doing hydrogen activities, some of them linked with port and maritime activities. But the message I would like to pass is the following. In many ports, many port ecosystem, you would like to do something with the hydrogen, and you need to move from the concept or the ideas to the concept, and then from the concept to the feasibility stage. The joint undertaking is developing a one-stop shop called the Hydrogen Valley Facility, where you could learn best practice, what exists. It's a platform for network, second service. And the third one, very important, it's project development assistance. So it helps to move from the idea to the feasibility. And we do that thanks to a call for proposal. The next one will open in Q1 2026. And there are two formulas, PDA Lite, PDA Plus. A team of consultant experts will come and push your idea to the next step, or push your concept to the next step. So this was the main message on the funding part. And to do what with the ports? Two things. Either to decarbonize the port operation, movement of the container, the bunkering, something linked with the ships, whatever, or the hinterland, the industries based on the coast next to the harbor, so that the port is an energy hub, if you want. So we've seen the service offered, we've seen what, so the imagination behind, and we are not alone. As Mirela said, there are some other funding instruments within Europe, the European program like CEF, standing for Connecting Europe Facility, or the Hydrogen Bank, as well as the European Space Agency, curiously, Space for Maritime, on the way to decarbonization, and other national programs that you are extremely familiar with. So I will stop now, but keep in mind this message. I have an idea, I'd like linked with hydrogen, I'm a port, I would like to move it, I'll go to this project development assistant from the Clean Hydrogen Joint Undertaking. Thank you.
Excellent, Lionel. Thank you very much for bringing few ideas where we can indeed help the ports, not only for Valleys grants or Valleys project development assistance, but I will dare to add even for innovations like the project H2 Ports was. Why not? Now, I know we are late, but still, we promised in the agenda that we will give you opportunities to put questions and a bit exchange with the panelists. Any question from the... I have many, so I will keep them for myself for now, because I promise we give you the floor. Any questions in the room to any of the speakers? No? A lot to digest from the lunch. No, really? Let me then start with one very, very easy question, because I don't want to take too much of the time of the speakers. But I will start with you, Tudor. Sorry to do that. To start with you. If you will recommend to us, because we saw in the room it's ports and hydrogen in ports experience a lot. Plus us, the Clean Hydrogen Partnership with some funding, not a lot. If we will have to do something tomorrow for the ports, something tomorrow for the ports to really kickstart the hydrogen activities, what would be, in your opinion, to be done first? Sorry, on the top of your mind.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, on top of my mind, of course. I think the most important thing in general is to know what you want. And I think if you can help the ports to identify what their wishes could be in relation to hydrogen, where do they see a potential, what plans they would like to have, where they see the barriers, how they would like to finance, and eventually afterwards they can think if they are willing or not to do it, but first of all to identify what they would eventually like to do. I think this would be great.
Stein, do you think that's the thing to do tomorrow? To understand the plans of the ports and the barriers, and then to see how we can help them? In your market perspective view.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think that makes total sense. Also linking to potential import corridors and those partnerships. Now, what I would think of is also the potential from lead markets. So I think that's something that is maybe still a bit unexploited, and I see it coming on the policy agenda. So it makes, to me, a total sense. Because in the end, the hydrogen economy and everything like that will only function when there is a strong demand pull. So if you were to ask me one thing, I would put my bet there. I know it's a bit more indirect,
No.
but I think that will be a facilitating
That
element.
gives me the right link to Stan, because he mentioned the shipping as the lead market and the maritime in particular on the transport side. Huh?
Yeah,
So-
yeah. I mean, I think the port side as well. I mean, in a way, lead market is just a way of saying, let's develop demand side measures. I think it's as relevant for the ports as it is for also for the fuels and the transport sector. The way that we see it is, if we want to create a business case for hydrogen in fuels, but also hydrogen as a whole, we just see that there is a lot of potential both in transport as in ports themselves as big off-takers. So, whether that's through some form of public procurement, private procurement, I mean, there's a whole lot of different policy options that the Commission could propose or that can be developed. But I mean, in terms of volume, anything that happens in ports and in maritime transport is more than enough to sort of kickstart the hydrogen economy in these sectors.
Yeah, thank you. Lionel, I know we work together, so I will not, but I think it's worth that I put this question to you, because you indeed see the value of working with the ports and developing their ideas into projects, like you said, the project development assistance. You see the opportunity to do more in that, right?
Yes, clearly. From the existing hydrogen valleys, many of them have port components, and the port is useful because it brings the scale, the volume, the quantity, the stability. There is the industry interland behind. So yes, indeed, the fundamental for good hydrogen ecosystem are most of the time located in port environment.
Yeah, and that creates the link to what Tudor said, because looking at the plan and at the ideas and making the plan, you then identify the barriers and everything else. You go through the permitting procedures and everything. Yeah. Still no question from the audience? Yeah, we have a question. Wait for the mic. And please introduce yourself.
Absolutely. My name is Heidi Tuiskula. I represent a company called Norwegian Hydrogen. We are a green hydrogen producer. My question may be to all, since we are talking about the market development, is if you have any ideas on how we together could actually accelerate it, because we as a company who is ready to sell hydrogen, green renewable hydrogen, see a lot of challenges in when we talk to our customers or potential customers. It's bigger than just wanting to, save the planet, because it's also the economical situation, and they have businesses that they need to run and keep profitable somehow. So sort of the whole when we see that there's clearly, we can all admit that green hydrogen is rather expensive compared to the alternatives that they are still allowed to use. So sort of, yeah, I'm just hoping as a small business who we're trying to obviously do our part in this game, is that we could somehow together figure out, I don't know, someone mentioned today a carrot and a stick. I feel that there is a lot of carrots which are scattered around and no one really knows how to make a soup out of them. And then no one really has seen a proper sticks yet that would work. So yeah, it's probably not something we can solve today, but if you have any ideas, I'm happy to hear.
Yeah. As always, I will try to make a soup myself, but because I always, when I get this type of question, I try to put my head into it to see how I can find the solution. But I will still go back to the panelists quickly. What can we do to make the business case working for, why not, selling the hydrogen? It's clearly the price, huh? But how can we go around it quickly? Stan, you go first. Yeah.
I think you're totally right. There should be carrots and sticks, and the sticks, it should be there. What we see is that both are kind of there, but also kind of aren't. So funding schemes are quite, as you said, scattered. There was this FT article recently that highlighted 3,000 hours or something on average to apply for a EU funding scheme. I mean, I'm sure there is a better way to do this. I don't have the answer to that, but that's definitely something that should be solved. That's on the carrot side. On the stick side, like I presented, there is opportunity to have certain RFNBO targets, and to have stronger penalties, and basically give some of this legislation and this policy teeth to really not only like incentivize companies to develop and to be competitive, but also to just ensure an offtake, because and then we get to the sort of demand supply side and the whole lead markets thing again. So yeah, both are super relevant.
Yeah, or I will say not enough sticks, so we should maybe have more. Stein, I saw you nodding. Would you like to complement?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's a bit of a $1 million question, right? So, I think it's that reality that we've passed through a bit of a hype cycle with hydrogen, but there's clearly a role, right? Now we need to make sure that those, the scars means the fact that it's expensive. We need to put it to use where it really makes sense, and that we also, let's say, focus our attention in terms of both supporting it or also with the regulatory framework. So I would say a focus is a key one. And then maybe if I may also come back to the previous question, just to reinforce also about the whole stakeholder and community perspective. I saw that working very well in the earlier study of the hydrogen imports, so that you don't have those strategies and so on. Nobody develops them on their own island per se, but you really interact and you share knowledge and experiences. So when you put a project in the ground, you can also replicate it. And we as a Team Europe, we push things forward together. Okay.
We are taking notes, as you can imagine, for our next study. Anything to add to the Lionel? No?
I think all what I presented, it was also complexity of regulatory framework, of financial incentives, and so on and so forth. But if it is one last thought, if you look of, again, hydrogen to have a role in the economy has to be contributing to low carbon economy. Otherwise, why should we do it, basically? And then we see that more and more we deploy renewables, the cost of renewables is going down, but the cost of integration of renewables goes up. If we can put the two things together, and very much it's about integrated project at the level of ports sometimes, to have the capacities where it's possible, to have the production of renewables, but also to have the production of hydrogen, could make business case. And creating and taking into account and finding a way to put a value also on the job creation, on the industries which are developed, on the ecosystem which are produced in Europe, because this bring value to the whole economic chain. And separately, each of them maybe don't make the business case, but if you take a comprehensive approach to all, find the mechanism to put them together and to make it work.
Thank you. That brings us to the next session, which is exactly what we are doing through the valleys. And this is where we will hear in a moment. But before we do that, I would like to give a round of applause to the first panelist. And really, thank you very much. It was a pleasure.